Okay, let's get started. This is one of my favorite topics, and I think it's something that can, if you understand what I'm going to talk about today and follow up, maybe even take notes, this can be probably one of the most important webinars you ever hear. And the reason is because this is where most people, in my experience, blow their careers. They blow it early on with these mistakes. They blow it later on with these mistakes. It prevents them from getting ahead. It prevents them from getting clients. It makes them jump around between firms. And it's really, in a lot of cases, more about how you confront yourself and your own weaknesses and things that are holding you back than a lot of times things that you may not quite understand in your career and the mistakes you're making. And this, honestly, I just had an episode where I saw someone that had no way, that did all these great clerkships, meaning I think they worked for a circuit court judge and went to a top 2 law school and then got out of the law firm world and was confronted with all these rules and just understood kind of the academic aspects of being an attorney, which most people think is, which I would say is just doing the work and trying to do a good job on assignments and not these other things that I'm going to talk about today. This to me is really an extremely important topic. And each of these pieces of advice, I think, is if you follow 15 of them and not 21 of them, you may have a lot of problems in your career. Some of this may be obvious to you, but I don't think most of it is. I don't think most people are necessarily prepared for these rules and how they operate. And regardless of your background, whether you think you're a really good attorney or you are a law student or whatever, if you don't understand these rules very well, or you miss out on some of them, then you're going to typically have a lot of issues in your career. And most people that have these issues actually never fix them. So that's the big problem. But being aware of these issues and things you may be doing may ultimately make a huge difference for you and change the direction of your career. So I'll do this webinar, and then after I do this presentation, we'll take a quick break just for a couple of minutes and then come back and do questions. So this is a live webinar. So typically I stay until all the questions are answered, and I'll do the same thing today. At some point I may have to stop, but I'll try to answer as many questions as anybody has. And the questions don't have to be necessarily about this webinar. They can be anything related to your career and questions you may have that are preventing you from the things you may want to know about your career and what you can do to fix them. So the first rule is that your attitude is just as important as the quality of your work. And in every law firm, pretty much that there's people that have very positive reactions to negative things happening in the firm, and they learn from them and they fix them, or they fix their reaction to them. And they don't get embroiled in drama and that sort of stuff. Drama, by the way, there's lots of addictions out there. Some people are addicted to substances. Some people are addicted to exercise. Some people are addicted to religion, and you can be addicted to all sorts of things. But being addicted to drama and being critical is something that will definitely hurt you in a law firm environment. And it ends the careers in different law firms of partners. It ends them of associates. It ends them of summer associates. And if you have a negative impression of your firm, or you think that there's negative things about it, and you are upset about that and making issues with people in terms of your outlook and the faces you make when you're dealing with superiors and stuff, that can create issues. It can also create issues when you have this kind of victim mentality, where if you get assigned certain tasks, you're mad and you have a bad attitude, and that can create issues as well. So healthy legal employers don't like people like that. In a lot of firms, I sent out a kind of a ebook to law firms last week. And one of the things that was interesting that I noted in the cover letter was that a lot of the best firms, which are things like Cravath and Wachtell, they actually don't even allow people into their firms unless they're a summer associate where they can evaluate them, because they don't want negative people with negative attitudes or even poor work product coming into their firms if they don't, and as attorneys, because it just undermines everyone around them. Most healthy legal employers are not going to advance people that have a negative attitude, even if you don't look like you have a negative attitude and you're not saying anything. Many times, if you think it, you're going to show it, and law firms will get rid of you if they think you have a bad attitude. It's just how it works. They will figure it out. They will see it in the quality of your assignments and the things you put into it. They will see it by the people you spend time with. And most healthy legal employers are basically going to push you out. Now, it's interesting that a lot of firms that have collapsed and had all sorts of problems are firms that allowed people to join from other firms that had bad attitudes at the partnership level. So this is how most healthy legal employers function, and trying to maintain that is really the name of the game for how a law firm can do an effective job with its clients and how it can create a good place to work. There's a lot of firms out there that are very good at it, about creating a good environment. It doesn't have to be a large firm. It can be small firms. It can be local firms. It can be mid-level firms. But the idea is that if you get people with a bad energy and that are bringing the group down, it can really hurt the entire group. And if you have a bad attitude, firms are generally not going to want you around if they can handle it. And how does it work when you have a bad attitude? I've seen people at major firms with a bad attitude, and they didn't think that anybody knew about it. And these are firms where they might have been a summer associate and been there for a year or two, and someone will just walk into their office one day and say, hey, we don't think you're a good fit for this culture. This is it. You got to leave. And this happens at AmLaw 100 law firms and even AmLaw 25 law firms. And so law firms do not like people around that are doing that. And it's just not good. There's a lot of big firms in Silicon Valley and small firms and mid-sized firms that do a lot of corporate transactional work. What happens when markets and the corporate transactional slow down? It's happening right now. There's less money going into private equity investments. There's fewer, if any, IPOs happening. A lot of companies are closing that are funded. And so a lot of these companies are in Silicon Valley. So when this happens, sometimes they have these summer associate classes that could be 50 plus people, or even new hires, even 100 people, in some cases, not many, and basically let people go. And they'll have corporate attorneys that are sitting around with no work, complaining, and just being overall negative about the firm. Now, obviously, in this day and age, people might just be staying at home, but assuming everyone was in the office, that negativity was something that would have been effective. It would bring down the whole firm, because if you have 100 people sitting around with nothing to do, they're complaining and all that sort of stuff. So it's just not good for the overall morale of people that may be doing things that are doing well, which might be like litigation or IP litigation or patent prosecution or whatever, real estate. But this particular law firm did something that was very interesting. It took all these corporate attorneys without any work, and it moved them into a separate building, down part of the same office park, but far away. And they just moved them in a separate building because they were dragging down the morale of the entire firm. And they didn't want these people around their other attorneys. Very smart thing to do, by the way. I'm not saying it's a nice thing to do, but it was a very smart thing for that firm to do that because they were able to basically contain the problem. And then eventually a lot of those negative attorneys were just let go from the firm, obviously to save money because they didn't have the work. And that's what happened. Law firms, if you have a negative attitude, they will not like you. They will isolate you. They will believe that you're bringing down the morale of everybody, and they will do whatever they can to fix that. And so that's just how that works. Now, the other thing at law firms is if you spend time with people that are negative, everyone knows are negative, then the firm will basically assume that you're infected and you will have a negative attitude too. And that's just how it works. If you're seen hanging out with a bunch of stoners when you're in high school, they'll assume you're a stoner. If they're seen hanging around with real athletes, they'll assume you're people just make conclusions about people based on the people they spend time with. A lot of times law firms are going to have different opinions about you based on the people you spend time with, and that can either help you or hurt you. So when I was in high school, for example, I had one of my best friends. This was in the junior year. He was suspended for an entire semester. He had upset a teacher in the school by doing something very stupid, which I'm not even going to talk about, but something very stupid. And then this teacher that had been very upset was also my math teacher, and I was under every impression that he didn't like me. And he came up to me and said he really wanted to write my college recommendations. And I thought that was pretty weird because I hadn't done that great in his class. I mean, I certainly hadn't been the best student, but he really wanted to write my college recommendations and told me he did that. I agreed, thinking he must have good intentions. And he did the exact opposite. He had been very offended by my friend and turned around and wrote just very bad recommendations. And he did also the same thing to one of my friends that was friends with this guy. It was very funny. So the recommendations were so bad that compared to the other recommendations, that some of the schools that I applied to called up and actually talked to the school. This is not, something's off with this teacher. I have no idea why he wrote these remarks. And is this really true? And then it was very funny. I was called into a meeting where the teacher ended up apologizing to me and said that he'd been angry with my friend and assumed that I was also a troublemaker. And I don't know, it was like with the dean and everything. So my school ended up fixing the situation. They had other teachers write recommendations. They said they didn't know what was wrong with this guy and basically covered it up or covered my back. But it was very interesting what happens. You're not always going to get this lucky in your career, though. If you spend time with negative people, your firm will also assume that you're negative. If the wrong person in your firm lumps you in with someone that they also don't like, then they'll come for you. I hate to say that, but if someone powerful in the firm does not like you and you're lumped in with someone that is negative and that they don't like, then they'll come for you. And I'm not being paranoid, but it's just how it works. Partners know the people who are gossiping and creating problems. They assume that if you're associating with those people, that you're going to buy into whatever their view of the world is, and that you will also be negative, and it's just bad. And in contrast, if you surround yourself with very positive people, it's going to have huge benefits. You're generally going to be happier because they're going to have a much happier outlook in the world. They're going to process information differently. You're going to probably do better in your job. You're going to show up and be enthusiastic. And you're going to enjoy yourself more when you're around positive people. I'm not saying that you have to seek out people that are all sunshine and so forth, but what I am saying is that you need to avoid, if you do anything, people that are negative and are going to be leaving and are unhappy or may lose their jobs. And this is just what firms do to those people. They need to, because they're trying to maintain an atmosphere where people are enthusiastic about their work and are bringing people up as opposed to bringing down. So you need to be around people that will bring people up and not bring them down. And if you want to be in a position where you're bringing people down, then you're just going to be in a bad situation for most of your career, because you're never going to be the person you want to be. And just one final point that's interesting is people that need to attack others, bring them down, are really doing so because they feel insecure themselves. And in order to feel more secure, to feel superior, they need to do that to help maintain their egos. And it's just not a good thing. And that sort of thought and that victim mentality is not something that you should be associated with. And so you do need to be very careful about surrounding yourself with positive people and being on the side of the people that are going to get ahead and do well, as opposed to the people that you know will not. So that's if you care about your career. It may help your ego to put people down, and then maybe how you are able to get ahead in your mind. But honestly, it would be often the worst thing you can do. A lot of times people go into law firms and they have these expectations that they should make a certain amount of money based on their class year or based on what people are getting paid at other firms. And so they believe that, and they believe it's all about work. And that's the most important thing, and doing the work that's assigned and not necessarily unassigned work. You are not going to necessarily get ahead if you come to work every day and just do your job. You're not going to find yourself advancing and getting to the level that you want to be. It's important that you're consistent, but you always want to do more than is asked of you. You want to put yourself in a situation where if you know a partner is going to want a certain type of answer, which you should be learning when you're an attorney, then you can give them that answer and also give them more of what they asked for. When I was in, and this is just a secret, but I'll just tell you, when I was in college, where I went to college, average grade point, it doesn't matter, but it was very difficult to get A's. You would, in a class, there might be one or two. It was just ridiculous. But I actually thought it was very easy. And it wasn't because I had any special ability to be smart or incredible insights into information that other people certainly didn't have. It's just, that's pretty far from the truth, because I'm sure there were a lot of smarter people. But what I was able to figure out was you get good grades in class when you understand the position that the professor or the assistant professor is coming from. So you understand what that person believes. And then when you understand what that person believes, you just give them more of the same. You tell them how right they are, and you make all these arguments in your papers that get them to buy into it, and tell them how much you think that they're right and stuff. And then they give your paper back and they're like, wow, that was awesome. Whereas if you disagree with them, they give your paper back and they note all their disagreements with your logic and everything. When you're doing what's asked of you or more than is asked of you, you're giving people additional reasons to support whatever argument they're trying to get, making them feel good, and coming out on the side of issues the way they want you to. And this also in doing extra work. So that's one aspect. Obviously, you don't want to point out things that are going to make your client lose their case or anything along those lines by not pointing out, but you want to do whatever you possibly can to support whatever they want. The recruiting firm and recruiters at the company traditionally have written articles every few months. And a part of the point of these articles is to get different perspectives from recruiters to share what they know, so the attorneys can find jobs, just like I'm doing this. And I'm trying to help you find jobs and help you try to do well in your next job or your current job. But I've always noticed something with the recruiters, and it's the idea that the people who put the most effort and time into writing these articles are often the ones who experience the most success, meaning they make the most placements. If they are passionate about writing an article that they're not going to get paid for, that really says something about them. And they often will write articles even when they're not asked, the best recruiters. I think that the people that do best in anything are the ones that put forth the most effort and are willing to take the most initiative to put all that effort into every aspect of their work. And this extra effort makes them stand out and be more effective. They're more invested in their jobs. They care more. They look better than their peers because they're putting in extra effort that other people aren't. And because of that, in a law firm, you're going to be more sought out for work. You're going to be sought out by the best people because you're going to produce the best results. If you do that with clients, it's the same thing. The clients will respect you doing a good job and pointing out extra things and not just doing kind of a simple job. And the idea is in every law firm, there's always going to be additional work that can be done for the client. If the firm wants, they can write off your time. But doing extra work is something that's going to really make a big difference in your career. Now, I'm going to tell you a secret about lawyers and something that it's important to understand if you're working in a law firm. And it's basically that if you have a client that you're doing work for, your objective, and this is just how it works. I'm not judging this. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's wrong. But the best attorneys are always the ones that are finding additional work and additional things to do. They will continue doing that as long as you are willing to pay them. And many times they will find extra things that they can do in transactions, extra ways they can protect you in new transactions, extra types of changes to your corporate minutes and your contracts, and they'll just keep going. They will never stop. So this is what good attorneys do, and this is why they have huge books of business, because they're able to find work to be done. it's the most fundamental aspect of being an attorney. And it's actually the most fundamental aspect of running a business, of working for you have to find work to be done. And this is incredibly important. You can't just take the work you're given. You take the work you're done, you do a lot more if you can, and then you also suggest and find extra type of work. And this is something that your superiors will love, because they want extra work for their clients if they can, if their client's willing to pay. And the other thing is, in addition to the extra work, just going the extra mile with your assignment, it shows that you care and you're willing to look very far and not stop and do this extra work. So what does that mean? Like, how does extra work? I'll just tell you an example. I was working for this attorney that had never lost a case, but had just basically ground other side into the ground with whatever he did. And he had this way of thinking where he'd tell you to keep looking for things, keep looking. And I had this one case where it was basically a pre-certified class action where there were 100 plus firms from all over the country, all working on the same legal issue. And what I did, because he just kept telling me to do extra work, so I went in and I looked at the legislative record when this law had been passed, things that they debated and when the law was passed, the reasons for it, and all that sort of stuff, where most people would just look at the law or the case law, but going in and looking. So that type of extra work is actually something that helped our client win the case and basically got rid of a lot of these cases. So extra work shows a lot and it can win cases. And this is how this guy was almost ever able to win. No one would look at things that much or do that extra work. So it makes a difference. Another rule to understand is that when people leave your law firm and that they're an important network, and essentially what that means is people don't stay in touch with them. Sometimes if someone leaves your law firm, attorneys will even shun them, meaning they don't want to have anything to do with them anymore. But the idea is that the people that leave your law firm are an extremely important network. They can be a network for you finding other jobs. They can be a network for you finding in-house jobs. They can be a network because they know other people that have looked and talked to different employers. They may be even in a position to give you business in the future. So these are hugely important people, the people that are leaving your law firm. Even if they're leaving for the wrong reasons, it's important that they see you as someone that is a good person and helpful and willing to provide advice, willing to connect with them. And it's extremely important to do that. There's a story I've told before about Bill Clinton. And he used to keep note cards of every single person that he ever met. And he would write things down. He would write down their names. He would write down what he knew about their families, what he knew about the things they'd done. And he would always review those on an ongoing basis to see the people that he knew and when he stayed in touch with them. So he could meet someone 20 years later that only met him briefly, and he would ask them about how different personal things were going when the person couldn't even believe that he remembered them. This is very important to remember people, to stay in touch with them. Some people will call on an ongoing basis, but you can use LinkedIn, you can use other methods, but staying in touch with people who've left is something that honestly can provide you incredible opportunities throughout your career, because each of those people is a potential source of business, they're a potential source of jobs, they're an important source of insight into your market and the things that you do into your profession. So they're people that you should really do whatever you can to stay in contact with. The next one I think is very important. It's always been something that a lot of people have, and that's an entitlement. And it's very common. It's common among both associates and partners and law students. And an entitlement is really believing that because of your past accomplishments or anything that you've done in the past, the firm should be happy to have you, that you'll always have a job, that you should always get raises, larger offices, promotions, and these things are a natural right that you have, and you expect that out of your employer. And this attitude is incredibly dangerous. It basically, what you do is you engender resentment towards yourself when you have those ideas, and then you make the law firm be more interested in bringing people in that don't feel entitled and appreciate them. This is a very dangerous thing. Some law firms have a whole culture where everyone's acting entitled. Others will not have that. But the better way to approach this particular problem is to make sure that if you're not acting entitled, you're making sure that you're making the people that are around you feel appreciated. And by feeling appreciated, they're more likely to feel good about giving you whatever it is you're seeking, whether it's a more competitive salary or more bonuses, because making them feel good is something that is very important. So I was talking to a partner not too long ago at a major firm, one of the top 10, probably most prestigious firms in the country. And this was a very high-ranking partner at that firm. And I was talking to him like in December or something, and it wasn't about him moving. It was about him finding people to help him and other partners. And he was just in this horrible mood. And I was like, what's wrong? And all of these associates are very upset because they feel like they deserve much higher bonuses and they didn't receive them. And so they're mad at me. And he felt horrible. And when you have that sort of attitude towards your benefactors, it doesn't do you any good. It just engenders resentment and them not liking you and them feeling badly about themselves. And so people that make other people feel badly about themselves are just to be avoided. And then even if they were to cave and give you a higher bonus, they're still going to feel badly about you in the future. So you really need to avoid that. Partners do that all the time. Like partners will negotiate for higher bonuses and distributions and things. And that also is something that builds resentment. It puts them in a situation where the law firm will try to get more power and basically, and then once the law firm has more power, they won't be in a good position. So partners do not like associates who are entitled. It's a bad use of your time. You should concentrate on getting people to like you. You should concentrate on being grateful for what you have. You should concentrate on all those things, because the more you do that, the more people want to give you, and the more work they want to give you, or the more opportunities they want to give you, or the more money they want to give you, because you're going to make them feel good while other people are acting entitled. And this is what associates do and law firms all the time. They act like this is like a unionized position and they're entitled to these different things. And if they don't get them, they're going to walk and it's not smart. You can really hurt your career. And a lot of people do. When I say a lot, it's a significant percentage of associates that do that. And even partners, when partners are leaving firms and things, they're often, and sometimes with very good reason, and I'm not criticizing it, but they're often people that are making themselves act entitled. So if you don't put in the time and you don't act like you're appreciative of what you have, then you're definitely not going to always have the right thing. People give people bigger offices, they give them raises, they give them titles. When you're making other people feel good about themselves, and when you're acting, you're entitled to something. I remember this one firm that I was at. This is years ago. Before they would make someone a partner, they would actually, and I'm not going to tell you the name of the firm, but they would actually pay them less than a fifth-year associate for a couple of years. And then you say, why would they do that? And the firm justified it by saying, you're buying into partnership with this, and if you do this, then people are going to feel a lot better. This was the idea, but it actually was pretty cool. It worked because people that stuck around were people that obviously weren't entitled, and the law firm had ways of basically getting rid of the people that thought they were going to be entitled to competitive salaries over a few years. Now, I'm not saying that was the right thing, but instead, if you're focused on your employer's needs and your client's needs, you're always going to do better. People go and meditate for decades. They get therapy. They do all sorts of things because they're just too focused on themselves and believing that the world owes them something. And in reality, if you're an attorney, your job is to serve others and not just your ego. And the more effectively you serve your clients and your fellow attorneys, the better off you will be. It's interesting that a lot of the best attorneys out there will spend years just giving to potential clients, giving advice for free, helping them develop business, helping them with connections and all that sort of thing. And the better they do that, the more business they ultimately get, and the more they rise beyond people that are just infighting for a piece of the pie instead of creating something. This is really something that I hope you can develop this lack of entitlement, because if you do, it's going to really change how people see you in your career, and you'll do much better. Another one is acting stressed at work. It can be very stressful being a lawyer. You can have too many assignments. You can not have time for your personal life. You can be stressed by judges and clients and other attorneys, not making you feel good about doing all this work. And if you are like that, it's basically the opposite of it helping you is going to be hurting you. And so instead of you thinking about how hard you work, what your superiors are going to think is you've reached the limit of how much responsibility you can handle. And everybody rises to their level of competence and what they can tolerate. And once that hits, then they stop. And so you don't want to put yourself in a position where you necessarily reach the limit of how much responsibility you can handle, because you're just showing so much stress and problems with the amount of work you're getting. People that have this, and they sometimes just in order to cope will feign illness or pretend they think they have some illness they didn't have, and all sorts of things will happen. So you need to learn how to manage your stress at work. And sometimes there's absolutely nothing wrong with leaving a firm because of that. I talk to people all the time at some of these very stressful firms, and they just say, this is not how humans should be living. This is not, and that's true. If you can't deal with it, then you need to move to some place where you're not going to feel that way. And there really is no reason that you should put yourself in that position on an ongoing basis. I don't see the point of it. It will prematurely age you. It will cause cancer and disease and all sorts of things, and you don't need it. When I was working in large law firms, I remember I would go in to work. I went into work once on a Thursday morning, and I didn't get out until Sunday morning. And that's pretty insane, but somehow I was able to keep going. And that is very difficult. This is not normal, but there are other attorneys that certainly work like that. But if you are under that kind of position, you really need to keep your cool. People will see you're working that hard. And if you're complaining about it, they're going to avoid giving you important assignments in the future. I remember my first legal job. I was next to this girl that went to Yale Law School, was very smart, and we shared a secretary. And she was turning in her timesheets. It used to be that you would turn them in manually. And a couple of days a week, I would see them because they would be on her secretary's desk, and they would say 24, meaning she'd worked a complete 24 hours. But I don't think she ever complained. She just was totally cool about it and did it. If you're going to work those sort of hours, you definitely don't want to complain, and you just do it. And then you figure out if you need to be somewhere else, or you can handle it. And if it was me, frankly, I don't know that I would be able to handle it, but you have to understand that this is what you need to do in order to get ahead some places and or to survive and even stay employed. So it's not, but any type of stress you experience, whether it's stress with your employer, whether it's stress at home, whether it's whatever your stress is, it's important not to show it, because it's going to get in the way of you doing your job. And people do not want to listen to people that are creating problems that can't handle that sort of thing. They just, unfortunately, that's just how it works. And if this happens to you and you're too stressed, then there's nothing wrong with going into a less stressful job. And you can find a law firm that's less stressful. It doesn't have to be going in-house or going to work for the government or something, but you need to push through and then make decisions based on where you can put your health and stuff first. And then these are some other kind of rules. You should always do your best to accept invitations to spend time with people outside of work if you can. You don't want to let your coworkers into your personal life, meaning it's okay to tell them you have a girlfriend or boyfriend and you have a spouse, or you like to play these sorts of games, or your parents did this or that. You can certainly talk about stuff like that, but it's important not to talk about negative aspects of your personal life. And you should definitely do your best to accept invitations, spend time outside of work with associates and partners. It's important for you to be liked by the people that you work with. There's no such thing as I'm only going to be professional, I'm only going to go to work. If you are able to break down those barriers and feel and people can feel closer and connected to you, then that's great. Now, I don't think that means you have to go out, and this is actually true in some firms, you don't have to go out and do cocaine and get drunk. And that's not what you should do. If that's what is going on, you need to be pleasant and try not to be caught up in that. But you do need to feel connected with people. And if your fellow lawyers see that you like them, that you're willing to loosen up a little bit, then they're going to be more likely to help you and like you as a person, as opposed to not giving you the best assignments and so forth. So people typically will work with people that they like. They will advance people that they like. And so you need to be really do your best to be likable, but in a way that doesn't bring negative personal characteristics and so forth into your relationship with others. And favoritism operates in most law firms. It's not just law firms. It operates in every professional environment. And many times when you see people that are very successful in companies and in law firms, it's the people that were able to form relationships that were beyond just formal, because formal relationships, if everything's formal, then that's what you get. But favors and things are typically done by people when there's some sort of affinity beneath the surface. That it certainly doesn't mean anywhere close to having romantic relationships with superiors or anything along those lines. All it means is that you are able to be liked, and people are able to see the good in you as opposed to see you in a different way than just in a formal way. That makes a big difference, and it's something that will help you. It's also a way to get information that you normally wouldn't get if you're just being formal, because people have different personas that they present from a formal aspect and then from an informal aspect. And this is just another one that I've basically been saying this for over 20 years, but because people are always on their cell phones. But the cell phones come out during meetings. People are looking at their cell phones and not paying attention. They'll often come up when a bunch of attorneys are sitting, talking to a partner about a certain matter. There's people that are walking down the halls with their cell phones and looking at them. There's people that are in different meetings or different in the cafeteria or whatever with their cell phones out. And when you have your cell phone all the time, the problem is you're just basically unable and unavailable to connect with people. And because you're unavailable to connect with people, those people don't feel the ability to talk to you about matters. They don't feel the ability to talk to you about different things. They feel that your cell phone is more important than their presence. And it's just not good. Around my house, my kids are always playing with their cell phones. It's certainly not something I like because they're tuned out. Now it's iPads. And the more you play with your cell phone, the more it's going to hurt you. And years ago, I knew a guy who owned a telephone answering service. And what I was thinking that was interesting, this is before people used to have telephone answering services because they wanted to make sure that if the receptionist was taking other calls, that the calls are always going to be answered. I certainly had them because law firms are calling and you need to talk to someone immediately or can't. And I was talking to this particular guy that owned the service, and I expected him to tell me that the service got a lot busier when the economy was good, as opposed to tell me the service got busier when the economy was good instead of when it was bad. And at the time, I think that I was talking to him, I think it was the 2001 or late 2000 recession. And I asked him how his business was doing. And he told me that his business actually increases during recessions because the bosses will see the receptionists playing with their cell phones all day. And instead of doing other tasks they could be doing, and then they realized that it was the first place that they could actually save money by letting go receptionists that were just preoccupied with their phones. And it's a very important thing to just understand. You need to be there to work. And when you're there to work, they need to basically see you working as opposed to playing with your phone. And if you're focused and on top of your jobs, you're always going to be the first person and the last person to be let go. But if you're playing with your cell phone all the time, it's just sending the message that something else is a little bit more important to you. When you're around people at work, it's important just to not only not look at your cell phone, but to be there and connecting with them, meaning you're making eye contact, you're listening, and you're not present somewhere else. And this is something that the best people do in any profession. Meaning, if you're talking to a client and you bring out your cell phone and start playing with that, the client's going to feel cheated. It's going to feel like you're wasting their time and money, that you're not listening to them. And it's the same thing with talking to people that you want to be your colleagues and also your superiors. So this is a big one. And if you are someone that does this, it's not good and you need to fix it. And I hope you do, because I've certainly been in situations where I've had employees do that and I don't like working with them. I've been in positions where I've been literally getting an exam in a doctor's office and they pull out their phone and start playing with it. So these sorts of things you need to be very careful with, because it's just not something, it's something that will make you very unique. And if you don't do that. And then this is a big one as well. Law firms of all sizes will monitor often your computer and your phones. I hate to say it. I'm not judging law firms. I'm not saying that they're bad places, because it's the same thing happens in companies. Some people do it with their own spouses in their house. This is just something that a lot of people do. But if your law firm is monitoring your computers and phones, you basically need to assume it's happening. But this is just something that law firms do. Big law firms will often do it because you're dealing with companies that are getting ready to do certain transactions that will change stock prices up or down. They do it because they want to see if you're on their team and you're not talking negatively about them to other people. They do it because they want to see if you're doing personal things at work. They just do it for all sorts of reasons. And then they get reports. I remember once I went into, this is at a law firm that's no longer in existence, but I went into this partner's office, and he was the managing partner of the Los Angeles office of Dewey Valentine. And he had a huge stack of documents on his desk and a couple big shredders. And I went in his office when he wasn't there to drop something off. And these were all just emails that people have been sending back and forth. And he was reviewing everyone's emails. So this stuff happens. This is just how it works. I've seen lots of attorneys, meaning fired for things they've said on the phone or emails them for their work computer. I saw multiple attorneys, but like sometimes people will post things on like Above the Law or Glassdoor or wherever without realizing, completely oblivious to the fact that the firm may be running a screen recording software on their computers, and they get fired. You could be a 10th year associate up for partner, and you could post something negative about your firm and get busted. So this is serious. You have to assume, and I'm sorry, but you have to assume that this is happening. And even though I know it doesn't happen at probably the majority of firms, some it does. And even something as simple as your phone conversation. I'm not saying this is illegal or legal. I don't know. But I know IT people inside of law firms that amuse themselves by learning everyone's secrets and by reading emails. I knew a guy that very well and I'm not going to tell you how I knew him, but he was someone that I had regular contact with because anyway, I would go to places and he always was there because he knew people I knew. And he was a IT person that worked inside of a law firm, and he would monitor people's screens and had a lot of fun printing up what he saw with people on dating sites, on fetish type weird sites. And then he would talk about them to other people. This is serious stuff. You need to just be very careful. The sites you look at, you need to be careful the emails you send. And I'm sorry. And when this particular IT person, I was at a dinner with him and several other people, and he got some information about a boss of his that had been sending some very disturbing things, and as well as having an affair. And he wanted to think if he could blackmail the person. This is very serious. Years ago, this is in a long time ago, I was working with a group of partners that were going to switch firms. And it would have been a huge placement because it was like an entire practice worth of these partners. And they were all ready to go. The firm they were going to had already got them offices and all sorts of things in the new law. And they were literally going in a few days. And then the firm they were at learned that they were moving because they had installed screen recording software on the computers, meaning They were logging in to their personal email accounts on their computers and sending each other emails about this. And the law firms were able to monitor their communications. And what happened is the law firm basically put a stop to them leaving. And I don't know how they did it, but they did. And so the people stayed in a position that they didn't like for whatever reason. Just the idea is, if you want to communicate with people, I wouldn't use your work computer. I would be very careful about talking, about saying things on on anything but your cell phone. Just be very careful, because people do lose jobs for this stuff, and it happens all the time. The other thing that's important is to help other people if there's not a direct benefit to you. This is the number one secret, by the way, of partners, and they get business. They get business because people become obligated to them, or enjoy or appreciate the fact that they provided help with no strings attached, and then do business with them later. People, and this is just how it works, people go in, and this is normal. It's in most law firms, is you will go in to a law firm with the idea that you're competing with every single person around you, meaning everyone is a competitor. Everyone's competitive with you, and you have to compete with them and get a one-up. And because of that, people will withhold information. They won't give people. They'll basically be against people that they're working with. They'll play games. They will sometimes. There's just all sorts of politics that happens, and it takes very little effort to actually go out and help people with the correct information, with telling them different insights to help them and to help people grow. And then when you do that, not talking negatively about their lack of knowledge and stuff when they're not there. Because if you get the reputation for doing so and helping others, you're also going to be well liked by the attorneys you work with. My story about that, and it's not that great of a story, but when I was in a law firm, when I worked for a federal judge who was extremely competent in terms of writing. He would basically demand that everything that I wrote for him was perfectly proofed, and extraneous language was out of there, and tenses and everything were right. And so I got into my first law firm, and I couldn't believe that when people would ask me to review their work, like many of those rules were just completely not paid attention to. And so I started helping people by people would come by and ask me to work on stuff. It was not billable because it wasn't my matter, but I would spend half hour, 45 minutes marking up memos and briefs and things and helping people. And that was very much appreciated. And I started getting a lot of work from other people, and people started talking to each other saying what a great attorney I was just from marking this stuff up. It gives you like a reputation. And then I started getting work from the best people in the firm. So you want to have a reputation of helping other people. And this is something, by the way, that people do with clients as well. So they get clients because they reach out and try to help people with different things. And it's getting a reputation for helping others when you don't have to, and putting yourself being seen as a source of help as opposed to a competitor, being seen as someone that wants to help a potential client instead of just get money from them is huge. And it works, and it pays dividends. And when you're helping people like that within your own firm, you're helping the firm. If you're helping people like that externally, you're getting their reputation. And the thing is that young attorneys, I'm sure I'll get questions about this today, because I get something about this question on multiple meetings each week. The idea would be I helped someone, they took credit for my idea, and they took advantage of me. That's great, because now you know that's what's going to happen if you help that person in the future. And the same thing will happen with other people, and that person will eventually get iced out. You don't need to worry about that. You just need to keep your side of the street clean. And if you do that, you're going to be a lot better off. The next thing is you want to concentrate, and this is a very important point that will change the direction of your career and your life. You want to concentrate on doing the work you enjoy and you're best at, and avoid doing the areas where you don't excel. There's this story that I heard this weekend, and it was about this Buddhist monk. And he'd been living in a monastery for 20 years. And during that entire time, all he could think about was how attracted he was to women and how wrong he was to be this way. And so he would keep banging his head against walls and doing all these things to try to take this horrible force inside of him out of that. And he did this for most of his adult life. until someone very wise came along and said, this isn't the person you are. You should be being the person you are. And that's not being a Buddhist monk. That's just being someone out in the real world and meeting people of the opposite sex. And you don't want to be doing, my point to you is, you don't want to be doing the work you don't enjoy and that you're not good at. And you should avoid the areas where you don't excel. And this is hugely important. It doesn't matter what practice area you're in. I've been looking this morning, I looked at the practice areas where the attorneys are getting the most interviews. And it's not what you think. It's like medical malpractice plaintiff attorneys, medical malpractice defense attorneys, insurance defense attorneys, and all these things, trust and estates attorneys, like getting the most interviews, meaning like if they apply to 10 firms, they're going to get maybe a couple interviews, whereas someone that might be in commercial litigation or corporate is going to have a harder time. There's nothing wrong with your practice area. There's nothing wrong with, you may think that you're in the wrong practice area, but you should do what you're best at, and you should avoid your weaknesses. It doesn't matter what your strengths are, and you should not be trying to do something that you don't enjoy or you're not good at because you think it's the right thing to do. That doesn't make any sense. You're going to spend your whole life and career being unhappy, and you could be where you might be a better management, being a better management. You might be better being an entrepreneur. You might be better. I've seen attorneys that are. I know an attorney that was at O'Melveny Myers, and it was like the top class in his law school, and decided to start a personal injury law firm representing people that were in small auto accidents and couldn't be happier. So it doesn't matter what you do. You need to go with what your strengths are. Your strengths may be you may be representing consumers in various things instead of big clients, and you may want to work for bigger clients and feel like you can do better than that. And that's fine too. It just doesn't matter. But regardless of your skill set, you want to be doing things you're the best at and where you're receiving positive reinforcement from. And I will tell you that regardless of how well you did in law school, regardless of where you went to law school, regardless of what your first job is, there is always a place for an attorney to do something. And it doesn't matter what the practice area is, but you should be doing a practice area where you're doing well. I remember not too long ago, and this is sad, but I see this stuff all the time. I was working with this woman that was a trademark attorney at a small to mid-sized firm, doing very well there, likely to probably at that firm become a partner or something within 3 or 4 years. I was getting work, had brought in clients, was just very good at trademark law and enjoyed it. And she decided that for whatever reason, she needed to work in a large law firm that had a really good brand name. And so she started applying to these firms, not just through me, but on her own, and got a job as a staff attorney, making less money, with no prospect of ever becoming an associate at a big firm. And basically told from day one, like, you're going to make 70% of what our associates make. You are never going to be able to be a partner. You have this title, but you'll get to say you worked at this big firm. And she took it over staying at her existing firm, over offers at smaller firms, because she thought that was really the awesome thing to do. And I don't think that was the right decision. That's just my opinion. But a lot of times people will do the wrong type of work in the wrong environments, and it's just not right. You should not push yourself to do something in an environment that it's not working out for you. You just shouldn't. If you're getting bad feedback from the market, maybe you're in the wrong market, or maybe you're in the wrong practice area. So this is just, what if Mike Tyson decided when he was young to be a neurosurgeon instead of a boxer? I don't know everything there is to know about his intelligence. He could be the most brilliant person in the world. I don't know, but I think this would probably be a very much an uphill battle for him. He's a boxer. He's a natural boxer with those natural skills that very few people in the world have ever had. And so taking those skills and pushing him into being a boxer is much more likely to give him financial success than doing something else. But this is what people do all the time. But you need to do the work that you're good at and have the most talent for, because if you don't, you're going to be pushing against something that's not giving you a lot of positive feedback, that you're not enjoying, that there's probably people much better than you. And if the current employer is not utilizing your strengths, it may make sense to switch to something else. I knew one guy, this is very fun. This is someone I knew pretty well in high school. And also when I got out, I stayed in touch with him. He was this brilliant scientist. His father was a scientist. By the time he was like a freshman in high school, he was taking like AP physics and calculus and all this stuff. Just freaking amazing, like how smart this guy was. And then he goes to college, a good school like University of Michigan or something, and majors in some science and comes out at the very top of his class, and then decides he wants to be a newspaper reporter, even though he can't write for hell, and spends his whole career, like now he's obviously been doing his career for a few decades or more, and just never got anywhere because he thought he needed to be a newspaper reporter because somewhere along the line, like his sister did it. And I don't know, but you shouldn't do things where you don't have talent. You're going to advance. If this guy had put himself into being a scientist or a doctor or something, he probably would have gone very far. And he liked it. He just felt, I'm good at this. I've got to conquer it. So I should try to work on my weaknesses. Working on your weaknesses isn't something that's going to help you. It's going to ultimately, because you're not going to get anywhere. When you work on your strengths, which is like your practice area, the practice setting, like where you want to be, then you're going to do much better. And then this is just a kind of another statement, and I don't like making it because it can be offensive to people, but you want to be healthy. You want to take care of yourself. You want to look and act healthy. And the thing is, it doesn't matter if your weight, I don't think really matters, but you have to look like you're vibrant and healthy. And that's going to have a lot of success in your career. It sounds cruel to say that. It doesn't mean you have to be, it's just, you need to take care of yourself. And I've got so many examples. I have one candidate that was the first in his class at a big law school like Berkeley or UCLA or something like that. Literally the first in his class. He got a job with a big firm in Silicon Valley as a intellectual property litigator because he was also like an incredible science guy, and decided that he was going to grow his hair and not stop growing his hair and not stop growing his hair until his hair got down to basically his buttocks, and he decided to put this in a ponytail. That anyway, he went out for interviews and firms couldn't believe it. They were just like, what the hell is this? And they found all sorts of reasons to reject him. And this stuff is true. And I don't like to say that, but if you don't look healthy, then it doesn't help you. It hurts you. You need to really do your best to take care of yourself. And I'll just tell you a quick story. When I was in a summer associate in a law firm in New York, I was out with a bunch of, associates, and they were talking about this partner that had all this business and was like the best dressed person in the whole firm. Like he would go out and have his suits tailored and all this stuff. And at one point, like he told a bunch of associates, like the reason I do this is because when I walk into a room with a potential client and I'm charging like $1,000+ per hour, or whatever it was back then, I need to look like the most formidable and put together person in the room in order for them to feel like they're getting their money's worth. That is how that person thought. It's not necessarily true at all different types of firms. You certainly look at a lot of our billionaires and tycoons and stuff. They don't necessarily follow those rules. But I think law firm people that do well many times will try to look the best they can and look the most competent as they can. When I go to the CEO roundtables and things with other CEOs of companies, and I'm always amazed that a lot of these people will talk about putting fitness and stuff as a priority. And I'm not saying that's something you need to do, but I think that having your being conditioned physically is basically what you're showing is you're also conditioned internally. And that I think is meaningful. I often see resumes that don't make a lot of sense. And when I say that, I say this with the utmost respect, but someone has gone to a 4th-tier law school or 3rd-tier law school. Their grades don't look like anything spectacular, at least from what I can tell. But then all of a sudden, you look at their resume and they've worked at the best firms in the country, which wouldn't make sense normally for someone with those sorts of backgrounds. So what I'm telling you right now is something I shouldn't be saying, but I'm going to say it because I'm trying to help you. And I'm just telling you what I observe. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not making any judgment calls here, but what I will say is 95% of the time when I see these resumes, the person just looks like a great athlete or something, and they that's it. I don't know what to say. But so this stuff, I think, makes a difference. I don't know. I'm just an observer, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong being overweight, because there isn't, and some of the most successful attorneys are. So there's nothing. I'm not judging that, but I'm telling you that if you take good care of yourself, then I think that has something to do with something that will have something to do with how well you do. What does that mean? It doesn't mean that you have to starve yourself. It doesn't mean that you have to run 10 miles a day, but it means you want to watch how you dress. You want to try to take care of yourself. And so you have, more to give, and it's what it is. And I'm not judging and saying I support any of this, but I am saying that I think it can help you more than it can hurt you. And I think it's something to realize. And then this is another incredibly important thing, that you need a mentor really in every law firm you're in. I remember not too long ago, I always talk to people that are like 1 year away from partnership, or 2 years away from partnership, or they didn't make partner and then they went and started their own firm, or they did something like that. And when you ask them what happened if they didn't make partner, they'll say, I thought so-and-so was going to support me and they didn't. Or if they're going to make partner, they'll say, working hard and getting a mentor and someone behind me. And you will find that if you look at the people that become very successful inside of law firms, a good portion of the time, meaning 80% of the time, or 75 or 90% of the time, that someone is behind them and sponsoring them and giving them work and providing them information and telling them what they need to do, telling them the kind of mistakes they're making, telling them how to correct their mistakes, telling them what they needed to correct those mistakes, and all sorts of stuff like that. You may have a difficult time finding a mentor and advancing. And many times, people that you want to be your mentors will blow you off because they've got too many people just striving to get their attention, and they'll only give this gift to you if you really give them something in return, meaning work or admiration, or you're vulnerable and ask for help. And mentors can serve multiple purposes. They can lobby on your behalf. They can point you in the right direction when you're making mistakes and get you back on the right path. They can tell you the kind of people to avoid. They can prevent, this is what I'm doing with you right now, is mentoring you. But imagine if you had someone in your own firm doing this, and they can assist you in many useful ways. That's one of the reasons I also stress the importance of going to social events and firm type things, because if you do that, it's going to help you a lot. And so you want to do that. And when you watch and observe your work environment, you're often going to find that advancement is very difficult without a mentor. It's just not going to happen. Not too long ago, I was on a plane sitting next to a partner of a major American law firm that's almost impossible to make partners with, and talked to him about a story. The story was very simple. When he got to the law firm, he started doing work for one partner and just worked as hard as he freaking could, met all his clients, and worked very hard for 10 or 12 years for this partner. Then the partner retired and gave him all his business, and the firm had absolutely no choice but to make this guy partner, because he was basically working with a $20 million plus book that was given to him. If you're in an environment where you can't find a mentor, where people are going to be blowing you off when you try it, or when your mentor is someone that themselves doesn't really have any push in the law firm, it may actually make sense to leave. You may be better off at a smaller firm where someone's looking out for you than continuing to play a game with a larger law firm. I saw, when I was practicing law, I saw and learned about later numerous attorneys who were advanced and made partner because they had a good mentor. It happens at most firms. Most people that get ahead and get jobs in the best law firms are made partner, or are even able to stay partner, meaning you don't just become a partner and no longer need a mentor. You need a mentor for your whole career. You need people that will get behind you. If you don't have a good mentor, you're going to definitely be held back, and it's going to hurt you. And you need to do everything you possibly can to find a good mentor. It's crucially important, and something that you definitely need to do. And I think that, again, most people never learn these lessons. Not even learning one of them, like the one you just heard about getting a mentor, could literally change the whole direction of your career. I'm really trying to provide a lot of value here. I'm not trying to, and I want to make sure that I think if you're learning this stuff, it could literally change your life and how happy you are. And a lot of attorneys end up unhappy for decades practicing law. So these are very important reasons and things to understand. So this is another big one. This ends up losing and hurting so many careers, just stopping them in their tracks. And you need to understand. So if you behave poorly outside of work, your superiors will generally learn about it and they will judge you for it. People think that they can go crazy outside of work and it won't affect their jobs. And certainly it depends on the firm. So there are firms where they think that it's cool that you're acting crazy, but in most of the cases, it's not. It literally couldn't be further from the truth. If your personal behavior is bad enough outside of work and other associates learn about it, or whoever learns about it, it's generally going to get back to your law firm and can affect you at work. What does that mean? It means a lot of stuff, and I'll talk about it in a second, a little bit more detail. But I have seen numerous, when I say numerous, I encountered them regularity, people that lose their jobs because of their behavior outside of offices. And sometimes the behavior is not even that bad, but they end up upsetting the wrong people. So it's important to understand. And I personally, I don't necessarily think this is a good thing, but when you're not working, you're a representative of your firm. And when you're at work, and even when you're not, you may see people that are in power, whether it's politicians or people that are in charge of businesses and things, doing all this sorts of behavior that is unbelievable. And they're at the top of the pecking order in terms of their careers. The problem with being a lawyer like that is a lawyer is expected to, because of your position in society of being a representative of other people that are allowed to be out of control, you're expected to maintain certain standards in terms of your behavior. And if you behave in a way that reflects poorly in your firm, it definitely can affect your job in a negative way. It's just how it is. And I have so many stories I could tell you about this. I'll just tell you a couple quick ones. I knew a woman that was a senior attorney and was going over with a group of other attorneys to another law firm. She was moving from a mid-sized firm to a major American law firm. And because of the people she was associated with the firm, was guaranteed a partnership place within a few years, all these great things. And someone looked at her Facebook page and saw that she was complaining about not liking practicing law, and that put an end to her career, pretty much. I saw another case where a woman that I knew came to work and had a wild weekend with some guy she just met and told a woman attorney she worked with about that. And that got back to the firm, and things didn't go well for her. So this stuff is real. You don't want to tell people if you have a drug problem or an alcohol problem. You don't want to tell people if you had psychological problems in the past. You don't want to talk about anything. And I'm sorry. I mean, I don't like saying this stuff, but people will start labeling you by those things. And again, there's plenty of very successful people in the world that have gone through these problems, but they're not people that are expected to take care of others and reflect, and whose reputation. There's just all sorts of reasons. This is just how the legal profession works. I'm not judging it. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but you have to get better at it. So another thing you need to do is you need to ask your superiors what they think you need to do to improve. And then once you ask them that, you need to use that advice. So many people are afraid of asking what they're doing wrong because they want to maintain this identity that's self-imposed, that they're doing a good job and that there's nothing wrong. So most people are walking around almost like this, protecting themselves from pinpricks and things that will destroy how they see themselves and their personal identity. And that's not something that you should be doing. You need to make sure that you're trying to make sure that your weaknesses and things, that whatever they are, that you can address them. And there's nothing wrong with having weaknesses. So everyone has weaknesses. It's everyone, the most successful to the least successful. But the big thing you need to do is if you do have those weaknesses, you need to learn how to fix them or work around them. And when you address your weaknesses, what you're doing is you're showing the employer that you're interested in improving and taking your job seriously, and then you're working on addressing those weaknesses. And firms want people that are interested in improving and taking their work seriously. Asking how you're doing, asking what you can do to improve, and all that sort of stuff is very important. and allows you to be in a position where you're fixing it instead of trying to protect your ego and trying to feel good when maybe things aren't good. That would be like if you're on a sports team and they're measuring your sprinting speed, how much you can lift, your yards per run. This is what elite athletes do. And it's the same thing you should be doing in your job. You should be figuring out where you can improve. And then this is another thing. I brought it up earlier, but it's about the importance of engagement. And if you're not engaged in your job, you really shouldn't be doing it. You should find a new one. There's nothing wrong with not liking your work. There's nothing wrong with liking your firm and the atmosphere you're in. There's nothing wrong with any of this. But if you don't enjoy your job, the odds are pretty good that you're not performing well. So what's the point of doing something where you don't enjoy and you're not good at it? All that's going to happen is you're going to be disappointed and not do a good job. So if you don't enjoy it, you just need to find a job doing something that you enjoy. And it doesn't have to be practicing law, because whatever you do, if you do it and you like it, you'll do well at it and you'll get ahead. And a lot of attorneys, that do their best at work are rarely going to get ahead or want to. In order for you to get ahead as an attorney, you need to be enthusiastic and excited about whatever it is you do. If you're a real estate attorney, it needs to excite you. You need to think there's nothing I would rather be doing than being a real estate attorney. You need to believe in it. Then you need to go out and believe in it in front of clients. And then you need to believe in it in front of your superiors, because this is what your lot is. If you've cast your lot doing this, and if you don't enjoy it, that's really bad. But you can certainly have a hard time your first several years when you're learning to a practice area and you're getting criticized and learning this. But if you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel and it's something you're not going to enjoy, then you're going to have a very hard time in your career, and you're not going to reach where you want to go. You're never going to make the type of living. You're never going to be happy. Nothing is going to work. You owe it to yourself, to your family, to enjoy what you're doing and to be engaged with it. You should be able to get up and be excited to go to work and do your job. And if you're not, you're in the wrong practice area, you're in the wrong practice setting, or you're in the wrong profession entirely. And again, there's nothing wrong with that, but you have to do something you're engaged in, because it's in no one's best interest. If you're not engaged in something, you're not going to be helping your clients. If you're not engaged in something, you're not going to be helping your firm. If you're not engaged in something, you're not going to be helping yourself, because you can find something else that you're engaged in. And if you do that, you're just going to be so much better off. So you need to do that. If your law firm is going downhill, you should also find a new job. There are plenty of law firms that are going downhill. There are small law firms that are going out of business all the time. There's medium law firms. There's even large law firms. And there's certain law firms that are just in trouble. They are often mismanaged. They have bad management, and the management just continues and they don't fix it. They may be too heavily invested in a practice area, and that practice area is shrinking. They may not be able to hold on to lawyers because they're such toxic places to work. There's a lot of law firms that are bad, just as there's companies that are bad. Companies go out of business all the time, and law firms also have problems. You need to be part of an environment, a law firm that's growing and where things are happening. So what does that mean? That means you can join a law firm that's expanding and where there's opportunity and where they're getting more and more business and where people are excited and where things are going well and where there's going to be opportunities because there's so much work and the law firm's getting such a great reputation. You can find a law firm like that. Or you can find a law firm where the opposite is happening, where people are sitting around with a lot of work to do, where there's bad reviews and they're getting rid of people, where the partners are toxic with each other and toxic with you. You can find employers like that. And if you find a law firm like that, and that's where you want to be, that's probably not a good use of your time either. So you need to put yourself in an atmosphere that helps you. And so I'm not saying that all law firms are great and you need to adopt to them, but you need to find a place that's not in trouble and where everything's more positive than negative. That's like being in a toxic relationship with a friend or with someone of the opposite sex or whatever, or the same sex, and you're romantically involved with. That's not good for you. It's not good for them. It just doesn't work. So you need to put yourself in a good environment, because there are environments that are positive, and you need to protect your legal career. You need to invest your time and effort with an employer that's growing, not retreating, where things are positive and not negative, where there's opportunity and not opportunity leaving. Opportunity leaves because the law firm's not well managed. It leaves because they have not good compensation systems, at least because there's a million reasons why law firms have problems. The same thing with companies. But if you're in a law firm that's having those kind of problems, you need to get out of there and find one that works for you. It's just, there's nothing you can do about it. And it's beyond your control, but you need to find a place where things are good. And only you know what that is. But here's what happens. If you join a law firm that's growing, where there's opportunity, they're going to want you to stay. It's going to be exciting. The clients are going to be excited, all sorts of things. But if you join one with the opposite occurring, you're not in good shape. Another one is you need to be a fit for the culture of the firm. You always need to try to be in a place where the culture matches you and not the opposite. So certain law firms' cultures are what they are. You don't know what those cultures are, but you can pretty much pick it up pretty quickly when you walk in and you start meeting the people in charge. It doesn't mean that is right or wrong. Hundreds of different types of cultures. There are cultures that are based on ethnicity. There are cultures that are based on religion. There are cultures that are based on where people went to school. There are cultures that are based on what people do in their free time. There are cultures that are based on whether people have families or not. There's all sorts of cultures. And the only thing is you need to do is you need to find a culture where you're happy. Many times you can walk into the firm, you can spend a few minutes there and just see how people are acting and stuff and know if it's a culture for you or not. You'll just pick it up. It's in the air. But you need to be in a culture that works. And it's extremely important that you're in part of a law firm where you're comfortable with the culture. Because if you're not, if it like strikes you immediately as like a place that's scary or you don't like or there's something wrong with it, then that's not good. So if you feel you don't fit in with the firm, you just definitely need to find a firm or organization where you do feel like you fit in. You need to be part of the right culture. It's going to make a difference. Why would you want to be part of a culture where you're not happy? Why would you want to feel part of a culture where the people that are in power are all so much different than you, like you can never see yourself as part of that culture? Why would you want to feel part of a culture that seems fake and it's just not really a real culture? There's all sorts of problems with the cultures, but you definitely need to be in the right culture. And we're almost done with these. There's a few more, and then we'll go to Q&A. But the other thing is you need to always be improving. You should not be content being the person you were a year ago. You shouldn't be content being the person you were 6 months ago. If you never stop improving, you're going to be way ahead of the ball. Constant improvement, getting better and better is something that honestly can change your life. You want to constantly be improving. There's a saying, it's called CANI, constant and never-ending improvement. And meaning you're constantly getting better at your practice area. You're constantly learning more. You're constantly thinking of new ways to approach problems. And there's a lot of people that stop improving. There's some people that graduate from an Ivy League school and think that they know everything now and they don't need to do anything to improve. There's people that graduate from law school and think, wow, I went to this great law school. I'm done. I've reached the pinnacle of everything. And now it's just making use. You have to never stop improving. That means you need to find environments where you can always improve. You need to improve at your job. You need to be enthusiastic about it. Because if you do all these things, you're continually going to get better and better. And you need to improve and grow and get better at what you do. If you don't stop growing, then you're going to surpass everyone. So what does that mean? It means that your career is like being a racehorse. There's certain racehorses that start out at the end and then will save all their energy and keep getting farther and farther and then eventually be the leader and win the race. And that's how you need to think about things. You can start at the bottom. You can start at the worst possible law firm, paying the least possible amount of money, but you're improving. And if you're improving, then you're going to be way ahead in the long run of anyone else because you have the ability to never stop improving. If you lost a job or you were unhappy, get a better job. Make sure it's an even better one and do better. The idea is you own your future and no one else does. That in the past has already happened. You should never be dwelling on that, and you can make your future be pretty much whatever you want it to be. You have to visualize who you're going to be. Like, what are you going to achieve? What are you going to do with your career? And just write down goals. Most successful people, by the way, have goals. Almost every successful person out there has goals. There's a famous study that actually at some point was proven not true. It's a fun story. It was self-improvement guy talked about it, then other people picked up. But the idea was that, I don't know, 1950 or 650 or whatever it was, they interviewed all the graduates of Yale College and they said, what do you want to be? What do you want to do? What are your objectives? And something like only 5% of the people that were graduating knew what they wanted to do and who they wanted to be. And the other 95% kind of said maybe this, maybe that, but weren't real definite about what they wanted to do. The 5% that knew what they wanted to do and could see who they were going to be and what they're going to be able to achieve had a net worth of 5 times something or double the 95% what their whole net worth was, and 3 times the happiness and all this kind of stuff. The study actually was proven not completely accurate, but the underpinnings of it were. So you need to think about that. And the people that do have goals and know where they want to go typically get there. If you don't have goals, you're just going to be led around by other people that do have goals. So you're much better off having goals than not having them. This last one, there's one more after this, but it's FaceTime, how important FaceTime is. FaceTime is very important. A lot of people think that they can work completely remotely, and that's perfectly fine. But when you're hired to work somewhere, they're really being hired to work and be part of a group that works together. What that means is that your presence is important. People, when you're around other attorneys at your job, that is a form of just physical support, meaning your presence is a form of support and commitment. If people see you around, it's much easier for them to give you work. It's much harder for them to let you go if the firm is slow. It's important because you're available for questions. You can see people and talk to them at lunch. You're considered part of a team. You can walk in and pitch in with things. And there's just so many important things about FaceTime. People think, oh, I want to work remotely. But if you do, that's fine. But it's not necessarily something that you want. I have lots of employees that work for me that are remote because that's just how things are. But I will tell you that I am always worried that not being in an office, they're not working. I'm usually right because I call and people are like driving around in the middle of the day and stuff, or the phone's not getting answered. And so there's that assumption. I'm not saying everyone does that because most people don't. 90% of them don't, or maybe even 80. But the employer, if you're not there, is going to assume that you might be goofing off and not as focused if they don't see you. And it's just not the perception you want to have. And so you have to be, if you can, you're going to be much better off in an office than if you're not in an office. And it's just going to impact your success. You're going to learn more. You're going to, if other people aren't doing it, you're going to be much harder to let go or not advance when they see you there. It just is a form of commitment that's just as important as your hours showing that you're there. I remember my first law firm, I couldn't believe it. The entire law firm would come in on Sundays, everybody. And if you weren't there, it'd be like, where the hell were you? So FaceTime, and it was just basically by being seen, by looking committed, and that's just how it is. And so you need to make sure you participate. And the last one that you need to understand is the fact that you're a product. And what does that mean? It means that you're a product, and essentially as a product that offers a service, you are bought, sold, traded, let go, improved, or whatever as a product. And because you're a product, you always need to realize that your objective is to be the best possible product in the market. And by product, you need to look the best. You need to have the most features. You need to be the product that has the most stuff going for it, that's the most well thought out. So how does a product work? But just think about a car. Like the best cars, everything is very well thought out. Things are put in the right place. The car does what it's supposed to do. It does it better than other cars. It may cost more because of that, but the best cars typically are the best products. People think differently about a Mercedes than they do a General Motors car, a Buick or something. So it's because they're different types of products that have different levels of thought and investment and things that go into them. So you're a product. And because you're a product, people will basically choose, when they're presented with you and their alternatives, they will choose you as the best product if you are the best product. And a lot of law firms will let people go that when they know that they have a brand or something that they can replace with better people. So if you are going to be a product, and you are a product, you need to realize that you need to be the best possible product you can. If you are a Medicare attorney, you're going to be a much better Medicare attorney if you learn everything there is about Medicare, if you get experience in the best firms, if you work with the best people, if you understand, if you work for the government doing that, all these sorts of things are going to make you a better product. So you need to think that every decision you make is to make you a product. It's very interesting too. There's all of these, I was reading yesterday about these things, these college preparation consultants that charge like $120,000 or something to prepare kids to apply to good colleges. And essentially what they do is they, not only are the kids expected to get good grades and stuff, but they help them present themselves as the best possible something with an interest in something. So it could be, you might be someone that's interested in bugs and have written papers on bugs and collected bugs and gone to all these seminars about bugs. And so you're the bug person. So you apply to Stanford, and instead of just being a great student, you look like someone with a real passion. And these are the type of people that are advanced. And so you have to, with your practice area, with everything you do, you need to think of yourself as a product, and you should never get complacent. And if you get complacent and just think you're just going to be an average product, then that's what you're going to get out of your career. You're going to be considered average. You're not going to have any distinguishing characteristics. You're going to have a very hard time getting ahead. So you need to always think of yourself as a product, and a product that's improving. So what does a product that's improving do? So let's take an example of cars. It's just fun to talk about cars. And the reason I talk about cars is because basically I'm from Detroit, and that's what I grew up around, a bunch of people in the automobile industry. But here's how different products kind of work in the automobile industry. So this has always been the truth. But in the 1970s and 80s, what used to happen with American cars is American cars would come out with, they'd say, okay, this is our sedan. And it would be Buick something rather, or Chevrolet something rather, or Chrysler this. And so in year one, they'd come out with it. Then in year two, they might put some new fenders on it to make it look different. Year three, they might change the headlights a little bit, and they might put in extra feature inside. They would just basically do very little to change the car, and they would do that for as long as they could, and then they would come out with a new car, which is fine. That's what they would do. But they would never really make any substantial changes to the car other than putting fins on it or a new looking windshield, or just nothing really substantial. In contrast, German cars, they would build BMW 3 Series or whatever, and then they would continue refining it year after year. They make the engine better. They'd figure out how to make the placement of the doors tighter together. They would figure out if they could use a different form of glass or different buttons to make things. And they would just continually refine it over and over and over again until they got something that was as close to perfect as they thought they could make it. And then at that point, when the model got a little bit tired, they would start rolling out a completely new version of the car, that whereas the Americans would have been just putting new fins and things on the car. So that's the idea of getting complacent. And because of that, a lot of American automobile companies almost went out of business. And so it's the same thing with you. If you are not making substantial changes to yourself and becoming a better and better product, which means you start getting business, or you become an expert in your field, or you start talking to groups about your practice area and stuff, then you're going to be in trouble. And that's something that the best people understand. So you really need to think about yourself as a product. Okay, so I apologize for this being such a long presentation. I didn't expect going into it necessarily it would be else. So I'm going to take a quick break. And then when I come back, I will answer as many questions as people have, whether it's about this or anything else. For attorneys who are unintentionally surrounded by negative influences, what practical advice can you offer to help them mitigate any potential harm to the professional reputation? So that's a good question. I think what happens is you have your white shirts and your black shirts, which is just exactly what it means. And you choose what type of person you want to be around. And that's really your decision. If you are with the black shirts, you're going to become and I shouldn't use the word black. Let's use red shirts, just white shirt with let's say happy shirts. I hate these kind of old, should be obvious, happy shirts versus unhappy shirts. So if you surround yourself with unhappy shirts, that's just going to be what you're going to become. You're going to become unhappy. You're going to become defeated. You're going to see things through a negative light. And if you surround yourself with the happy shirts, it's the opposite. So you will see things more positively. And So there's nothing wrong with being surrounded by negative influences because they're around everywhere. They're around any time a group of people gets together. But at the same time, if you allow yourself to be surrounded by those people, it's going to rub off on you. So it's not necessarily going to harm your professional reputation if you're around those sorts of people, but it's going to influence your happiness, how you look at your job, how you think about things, and ultimately what happens to you in your career. My advice would just be to do your best to surround yourself with as positive people as you possibly can. Oh, by the way, so if you ask a question and you're logged into Zoom and your word is going to show your name, I won't show your name, just cut and paste it. Okay, so I cut and paste the question. So in cases where unassigned work doesn't lead to immediate recognition or advancement, how can an attorney stay motivated and continue to invest in these efforts over the long run? Okay, so again, a lot of what happens in your career and in your life, furthermore, you're not going to get immediate recognition or be advanced for it. It's just not going to happen. So the only way you can fix any of this is really to stay motivated and continue to do this stuff over the long run. Ultimately, the people that get the most in their careers tend to be people that will take care of others, even if they don't get immediate recognition for it, and it will help you in the long run. I want to tell a quick story because I think it's interesting. It's about a guy I know that started this very successful electronics import-export business and how he became so successful. So he was from Iran and originally and had learned how kind of business was done there. And I'm not criticizing Iran or anything or an entire country or how they do business, but what he took away from his experience there was that most transactions were made in business where you were trying to get the best deal possible, meaning you would pound down the person you were buying things from, or vice versa. They would try to get the most from you, and where this kind of went on. And that was what made you successful, was how good of a negotiation you were able to do. So he'd moved to the United States and was setting up this electronics business. And he had this opportunity. He wanted to be able to buy this, and I may have told this last week or the week before, but he wanted to be able to buy these video game consoles that were being sold, like PlayStation 3, or I don't know what it was, a long time ago. And the profits on them were great. So he would buy them they would sell them for $150 to him, and then he would sell them for $75 to him. He would sell them to the stores for $150, and the stores would sell them. It's something along those lines, like just really high profit. And so he talked to someone that was a representative of the Japanese company or whatever the company was that was importing these. And they said, no, we're not going to sell them to you to sell the Best Buy and everything. But I'll tell you what we'll do is, why don't you turn around and try to get rid of all of these last year's models. We'll send you 30,000 of them and we'll charge you this amount. And maybe next time we'll have something for you. And he thought, well, why would I, get rid of 30,000 of these things and not make any money and spend all this time doing it? But he just said, okay. And so he went and did it, and it took him some time, but he didn't end up making any money on it, but he did what the guy wanted. The guy never called and thanked him or anything. And a couple of years went by. He figured, I just did all this work for some guy for nothing. But then after a couple of years, one day he got a call, and the guy, I guess some new video game console was coming out. And he said, how would you like to have 100,000 of these and the opportunity to turn around and sell them? And he couldn't believe it. Like, he ended up making an incredible amount of money because he'd done someone in the past. And so that can make a huge difference in your life and in your career, and can make a huge difference. I'll just tell you my personal story. It's not really on the same level, but it's how I got started in business. I had this, right before I went to college, I had started this asphalt business. And to make a long story short, I went at it with the idea of making as much money as possible, getting an edge in everything I did, of trying to do all these things to make money, to cutting the cost of my materials, all these bad things that I shouldn't have been doing. And after a couple of months of this, I basically bounced tons of checks. I upset all these people and just was really a failure in the business and emotionally devastated. And because I didn't know what else to do, I took a job working as a garbage man in my city so I would have enough money for spending money when I went to college, because my parents were in a position to even give me spending money. So I did this garbage man work. And then after a month or two of doing this, I started the business when I was last semester or whatever of high school. A month or two, I had saved up some money and decided the best thing for me to do was to go out and fix all this bad work that I had done and just make everything right, even though I had no incentive to do it other than how I felt about myself. And so I went out and did this work, and I was going around fixing things. And then I had this experience where I was in a hardware store buying some materials, and this man was buying a bunch of this, basically was asphalt sealant, buying a bunch of that. And I saw he was making mistakes because he was talking to a clerk. And so I went over and told him what he should be doing, how to buy the material and how much he should be buying and how to measure it and all this stuff that I didn't realize I'd learned when I did this horrible work. And he said, will you go out and look at this condominium complex that I'm in charge of? And he lived there, but was in charge of getting the work done, and tell me how much money I should be paying to get it done, and just look at it and so I can hire someone. And I said, sure. So I went out without thinking about it, just thinking I was doing something nice for someone. And I measured the whole parking lot, and I got there at 8:00 at night, and it took me till 11:30. And then I left him, I typed up a letter to him the next day where I just, told him everything he should be doing. And then I put it in the mail with the idea that I was just doing something nice for someone. No idea that I'd ever get any money out of it or anything. I just was trying to help him. And I figured he would hire someone that was experienced, and this is what he should be paying. And that was it. So a couple of days later, he called me and basically said that he wanted me to do the work at the price I had quoted him for what he should be paying. So to make a long story short, I couldn't believe it. And I went out and made the equivalent of probably what would be like $10,000 today in 2 days worth of work. And it changed my life. It gave me self-esteem. And the next summer I went into the business and did incredibly well. And I just kept getting better and better at it, to the point where when I graduated from law school, I had to make actually, when I graduated from college, going to even law school was something that I was like, I don't think I'll ever be successful being a lawyer than doing what I'm doing now. And because but it all started from giving somebody something for free. And so that's something that everyone should learn in terms of how business works in the world, is that and this is the same thing that all the most successful partners that have these huge books of business tell me that they do. They find general counsels and people inside of companies that are having problems, and they go and they help them, and they do it without any expectation of any immediate financial gain. But eventually all this turns around. It could be referrals, or the person goes to a new company and hires them. But you do stuff for people without expecting any corresponding reward, just being a good person. And very few people do that. And if you do that, it's going to change. It can change your life. It changed mine. I do these webinars. I'm not trying to help you. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm not telling you how great BCG is. I'm not talking about other companies. It's just because that's what you do. That's what people need to do. And most people don't. Most people expect everything to be a quid pro quo. And unfortunately, that's how most of the world works. And it just doesn't help people. Hey, what advice do you have for attorneys who want to be proactively seek out unassigned work opportunities without coming across as opportunistic or self-serving to their colleagues or superiors? I think that if you tell people or partners and things you're interested in doing the kind of work that they do, or that you think something sounds cool that they're doing, or you do that and you genuinely are interested in it, no one's going to be mad at you or think you're like a sycophant because you're interested in something, and it's not going to seem opportunistic or self-serving. You actually need to do it and come from a place where that's something that you're actually excited about, and you do want to help people, or you are interested in it, and you're not doing it for any gain. And that's the secret. The secret is to all this is you approach things without expecting any gain. You want to do for other people whatever that you can to help them without any expectation that they're going to reward you financially or anything in the future. And if you do that, then those people are much more likely to want to help you in the future, even when you're not asking for it. They will help you behind your back when no one's there and they're talking about you. They will help you in a million different ways, and you will look different from other people. It was interesting. I remember I was in law school, and I was having this just horrible relationship where, it doesn't matter, but where something very bad had happened to me. And it was with a girlfriend, and I was really looking for answers. And so I started going to church, and just on my own, I was like, God, I really need to figure something out here. And in any event, to make a long story short, I was at this church, and this guy got up, it wasn't a priest, it doesn't matter, but got up and said, when you give to charity, like, you don't do expecting to be recognized for giving to charity. You do so because it's something that you want to do, and you're not looking, your reward is not trying to look good to other people or talking about it. Your reward is just doing good and not expecting anything in return. And if you do that, all these other forces will come to your work. Whatever, I'm not saying godlike forces. I'm just saying the way people that are giving things come back to them. I don't know how that works. Maybe it's because of how they approach the world and people can see that their spirit's giving. I don't know, but that's the idea. So you never want to come across as someone that is only out for themselves. Okay, your advice to limit cell phone use in the office certainly has merit. In a situation when attorneys are juggling in multiple cases and waiting for crucial updates with strategies. Yeah, so that's great. So of course, you need to be always looking out for work-related stuff and things that are emergencies and that could pop up on your phone. And so the way to do that may be just to say, hey, I have this kind of important emergency that's going on, or a very important thing. Is it okay if I just check my phone real quick? I don't want to be disrespectful, something along those lines. And that's fine. People will understand that. My only point is that people are playing with their phones all the time. And a lot of times that can result in you being viewed in a negative light. Okay. So I think I already answered this question, but the idea is, what advice do you give to attorneys when they receive little direct gain? You do receive gain. The gain is that how you're perceived. You're being perceived as being on someone's team, as opposed to the opposite, is exactly what you need. So you want to be perceived as on the team of others, as opposed to the opposite, and mean it against them. That's it. So there's always going to be people that are going to take advantage of your generosity. There's people that are going to try to push off your work as their own. There's people out there that are the happy shirts, or I guess you could say the good shirts and the bad shirts. And that's fine. You do what you can to be associated with being seen as the right type of person. That's it. And that's all you need to do. And again, that will have its own rewards. People will think of you in a certain way as opposed to a different way. And that will help you. And these are all really good questions. I'm glad that I had the opportunity. It was actually the advice, this particular thing, you probably can search for it, probably on barnes.com or something. But it's called The Garbage Man Story. And it may not be on that site, maybe on BCG or something, I don't know. But it's a story about all this. Or you may just search for Harrison Barnes, my name, and then The Garbage Man Story. But you'll find the story. And it's a helpful story, I think, just for kind of understanding how you get ahead in life and business. This question is, in the context of law firm dynamics, how can I approach discussions about transition away from certain practice areas with partners, supervisors, and partners while still demonstrating my commitment to this firm's success? Okay, so that's a good question. So the idea is you can't just suddenly say, I'm a corporate attorney, I want to be a litigator, because you don't know what being a litigator is like. You won't know what it's like until you actually try the work. Or you can't discuss transitioning away from being a tax attorney to being a real estate attorney without really generating some concern. And the idea is that you're hired to do a practice area because the law firm wants to plug you into something where they can make money. And if you're suddenly deciding you want to do another practice area, that's scary to them because they're going to need to have someone in that place making the money doing that sort of work. So how do you do that? the best way to do that is to start taking work from people in whatever practice area you're interested in, and doing that quietly from others. So you network. This is one of the reasons I talk about it's important to meet with people outside of work and to go to different events. You network. You do whatever you can to do your best to get work from other people. And when you do, that will start, you can take work into doing different types of work and then transition into that at a time you might be ready. But you definitely need to try to track down that type of work on your own within your firm. If you can't, sometimes it makes sense to potentially, and if you really know you like that practice area and you really have reasons for doing it, it may make sense to work for another firm. So how does that work? If you're trying to switch practice areas, I talk about this every week. But the way that works is if you're at a 4 firm, which would be like Am Law types of firms, which would be, there's a very small percentage of the legal profession does that, then you would probably have to move to, this is like a mid-size, not as prestigious, not paying as much. You'd probably have to move to a 3 firm. And then when you move to the 3 firm, you would be able to eventually probably move back to a 4 firm once you have experience. Or if you're at a 3 firm, you move to a 2 firm, which would be some business. And so you just have to move up and down depending on what happens. So if you want to do another practice area and you can't do it within your own firm, then many times you're going to have to switch firms. I just tell you how difficult this is, just so you understand. I was several years ago, I was working with someone that had graduated the first in their class from Brigham Young University Law School and had a job at a big firm in California. This is a long time ago, so it's not out at anybody, but wanted to switch practice areas and basically had the entire nation as their playing ground. They would look in Texas, they would look all over California, they would look in New York, and with the exception of one firm in Texas that asked if they would consider doing a practice area the person was not interested in, that was really didn't get a lot of interest. No one would bite, because why would somebody with 2 years of experience? But he was only looking at the firms that were the same caliber. When he started looking, if he was interested in looking at lower tier firms, he would have gotten interviews, but he didn't. He had a big family, and so he ultimately ended up staying in his current firm. And when they found out, he told them he was trying to find another job. They actually did switch his practice areas. So you can do that, but it's just very difficult if you want to do something differently because law firms just don't necessarily always buy into that. It's hard from their standpoint. Okay, some attorneys might feel hesitant to approach potential mentors due to concerns about interrupting their busy schedules. How can aspiring mentees make a compelling case for mentorship while respecting their mentor's time commitments? Okay, so that's a good question. So the way to get a mentor is not to ask someone to be your mentor. The way to get a mentor is to do work for that person and have a lot of enthusiasm and be the best possible source of someone doing work for that person. And then as you do more and more work for that person, trust is built up. And as different things come up, that person will step in and give you advice, and then they eventually become your mentor. It's not that you will suddenly meet somebody and they'll be your mentor, or you'll ask them to be your mentor. You have to prove yourself to that person before they're willing to invest their time and so forth in being your mentor. That's all. So you can't just expect someone to be your mentor. You have to spend a lot of time developing them as a mentor. And once you do that, you're going to be, that's how it works. That no one's going to give their time to be someone's mentor if you're not helping them, or if they don't see part of themselves in you or something along those lines. You need to make them feel good about themselves before they're willing to invest anything in you. It's just how it is. Okay, there's some guidelines or principles I should follow in participating in potentially controversial activities. Since a public protest or advocacy that can impact how I'm perceived. Yeah, you're entitled to have political leanings. You're entitled to participate in protest and things. You're entitled to have whatever type of private behavior you want. You could be, it doesn't matter. I mean, you can be a swinger, whatever you want to do. You can, there's no reason that you can't do these things. The only thing you need to worry about is you want to be very careful to not allow a lot of that information to get back to your firm or to make it influence how you do your work. So maybe you're publicly protesting against the environment or for the environment and against big energy companies, and yet you're representing energy companies. So that's not going to really sit well with your firm or with your clients if any of that gets back to them. So you just need to be very careful and how you go about that, because if you go about it in the wrong way, then that's going to impact how you're seen. So it's very interesting. I see all these resumes all the time, and people are very proud of listing all of these, whether they're right-wing groups or left-wing groups or far left or far right. People will put them on their resume as if that's a great thing. The new one that I'm starting to see is people putting on these groups on their resume that they're not even a part of, and basically trying to look like not even a part of it. They're not. I don't want to talk about it, but they'll put all these groups and things on their resume, and it'll take like front and center over their legal experience. And all these controversial activities, which aren't necessarily controversial, there's nothing wrong with protesting to help a union or something or whatever it is you want to do. But it is wrong if it interferes with your job, or if you define yourself on that instead of being like a non-biased attorney, you define yourself based on that. So you just need to be very careful about how you allow that stuff to impact your career. Okay, these are great questions. I appreciate them. This is awesome. Okay, as an attorney advances in their career and potentially becomes a mentor themselves, how can they ensure they're providing effective guidance or remain open to learning from the perspectives of other mentees? So the way a mentor works is someone that guides people helps people make better decisions based on what they know without necessarily telling the person what to do. So I had this experience where, this is recent, where I'm in this group, this business group, where people that were supposed to be doing something with me, it was just like this small kind of group called a forum where business people get together and talk about business issues, where people were supposed to be part of this forum with me, and yet they weren't participating. I was mad. And so I had this mentor, and he started inviting me to these things about how to run a good group and stuff, because he knew that I was making a mistake with that. So it wasn't like he was telling me I had a problem. It wasn't like saying I was doing something wrong. He was just pointing me in the right direction. So that's really how you should think about things as a mentor. Your job is to help people make better decisions without telling them necessarily directly what they should be doing. That's what the best mentors do. So being a good mentor is important, and you don't necessarily need to guide people directly. You just guide them with different ideas and things that they may not do on their own, if that makes sense. Okay, in certain aspects of a law firm's culture seem appealing to me, but there are certain aspects that concern me. How do I determine if those concerns are deal breakers or if they're manageable challenges? Okay, so every law firm has stuff that's wrong about its culture. So you're never going to get a perfect culture. And there's always things that you can find wrong with the culture. So that shouldn't really be your job. Your job is to see if does the overall culture support me? That's it. If the overall culture, let me rephrase this, does the overall culture support me? Support me. So if the overall culture supports you, then that's good. If the overall culture to you is repugnant, then you need to get out, or if it just doesn't feel right. So sometimes you'll meet people and those people will not feel right. Sometimes you'll talk to people, or you'll be part of groups and you'll feel very uncomfortable. It's just what it is. And so when that happens, you need to run for the hills. But if the overall culture does support you, then there's nothing really to worry about. Okay, let's see here. If this webinar were mandatory, I think law school applications would drop by 50%, especially for women. 12 to 15 are the recipes for quid pro quo sexual harassment. So this is a good point. I don't know, really, let me see which we're 12 through 15 here. Just give me 1 second. I want to make sure I'm going to answer your question as well as I possibly can. So I'm certainly not trying to, let's see here. 15, give me 1 second. 15 is ask your superiors what they think of you and you need to prove. Okay. 14 is you be part of the outside work. Your percentage will learn about it. Okay, that's true. Your career may depend on having a good mentor. Okay. and it's important to take care of yourself and look healthy. Okay, so all those reasons, I'm not saying you're wrong to have that opinion, but I don't think anybody should tolerate, obviously, sexual harassment or be in a position for that to happen. But things like mentors and that sort of thing, or I don't necessarily think that if you're a female, your mentor has to be a man. And I will say that I've seen some very serious and dangerous issues of sexual harassment happen in law firms. And so I do believe, that it's definitely a case. But, these sorts of things that happen inside of law firms, I would say, just for my perspective, are things that happen in any employer. So that's something that can happen in any employer. And when I was in law school, I was actually sexually harassed by a male teacher, which, think about that. This stuff happens. And so you need to just realize that most of the stuff that applies to law firms also applies to other types of employers as well. So it's not just in terms of people that are in law school in law firms that it happens to. It's really an indictment, I guess, if you would put it, of almost every employer, because these things happen. I'm certainly not creating them. I'm just telling you what I see. Okay, what do you do if you hurt your reputation with a partner in your firm for being late to assignments, prioritizing other assignments? What advice do you have for redeeming yourself? So sometimes you can't, which is okay. No one is perfect. Not everyone's going to like you. Not everyone's going to think you do the best work. Not everybody's going to give you repeat business after you do work for them. So there's just all sorts of things that you need to be aware of that you can't necessarily fix. And that's okay. If you make a mistake and you can't fix something, you'll do the best you can. So the only way you can redeem yourself after this stuff is to do what you can to not have the same issues in the future. So what does that mean? It just means do your best work you can from other people, learn about the mistake you made with a partner, don't repeat it again, and just make sure that happens. Now, there's a lot of different partners in law firms. There could be in your office, there could be 10 partners, there could be 20 partners, there could be 50 partners, there could be 5 partners. But regardless, just having one person not like you or you've done bad work for them is something you can definitely overcome. So it's not something to necessarily worry about in the future and to think is going to hurt you in the future. Okay, so the last question is, will there be a recording of this webinar? Yeah, so this webinar will be posted on our site probably within a week. It takes a while to clean these up and so forth, but it'll be on there during about a week. So thank you, everybody, for all of your questions. I think these were great questions. I'm very impressed for everyone staying on in this whole webinar, especially after getting kicked off and the internet quit. And I think that this is a very important topic. I hope everyone took notes. And even if you didn't, you come back and remember this stuff. The whole basic idea of this webinar is that one of the most important things of any job, not just practicing law, but are these intangible things that are going on beneath the background. It's not just your work. It's not just where you went to law school. It's not just your practice area. It's not just your ability to do the work. It's all these other things that end up impacting your success. And so being aware of all these intangibles just means you have to be on a constant path of self-improvement and getting better and better after everything you do. The other thing I would say too is if you enjoyed this webinar, you got a lot out of it, always think about other questions you may have during the week, maybe related to this or other topics that you're thinking about. And certainly I don't know the answers to everything, but I've been doing this pretty much 10, 12 hours a day for the past quarter century, just as you will get this knowledge in your practice area or already have it. If you do it for a long time, that's just why I can give this help and information. So thank you, everyone. And I appreciate all the questions and everyone staying around after these problems. Hopefully I won't have these internet problems next week. And I hope everyone has a good week. Thank you.